Imagine an explosion so violent it could consume 1,000 Earths in a single heartbeat. A celestial cataclysm that would tear the fabric of your very soul if you were there to witness it. You see the white-hot plasma blooming like a lethal flower across the void, the shockwaves rippling through the stars, and the blinding light that signals the end of an entire world. But there is no roar, no thunderous boom followed by the crackle of burning gas. There is only an absolute, crushing, and indifferent silence. This is the first and perhaps most terrifying truth of our reality. The universe is a place of infinite violence that never makes a sound. For decades, we've tried to fill this void with our own soundtracks, translating the data of the stars into haunting melodies and screaming black holes, as if we are afraid of what the quiet is actually trying to tell us. But as we peel back the layers of this cosmic mute button, we are discovering that the silence isn't just a physical property of a vacuum. It is a symptom of a much deeper, more sinister mystery. We are living in a graveyard of information, where the messages of 1 billion civilizations may be reaching us right now, only to be smeared and silenced by the very stars themselves. Tonight, we aren't just asking why the universe is quiet. We're going to explore the horrifying possibility that it's actually screaming, and we are the only ones who can't hear it. To understand the true horror of the cosmic silence, we have to start with the most basic lie we tell ourselves about the night sky: the idea that space has a soundtrack. We've all seen the videos released by NASA, the ones where they claim to have recorded the sound of a black hole in the Perseus cluster, a low guttural moan that sounds like a choir of the damned trapped in an endless abyss. It's a haunting, visceral experience that makes the universe feel alive, as if the darkness itself has a voice. But there is a technical tragedy hidden behind those recordings that scientists rarely emphasize in the headlines. That sound is a ghost. NASA did not place a microphone in the center of a galaxy and hit record. In the strict physical sense, space is too close to a perfect vacuum for ordinary sound waves to ever reach a human ear. Sound requires a medium, a dense collection of particles that can carry a pressure wave from a source to a receiver. In the vast, lonely stretches between the stars, there are far too few atoms to sustain a vibration. The black hole scream you've heard is actually a data translation, where real pressure waves detected in the hot, dense gas surrounding the cluster were artificially shifted upward by 57 or 58 octaves, just so our primitive biology could perceive them. We are literally manufacturing a voice for a universe that, by its very nature, is designed to be mute. This literal silence is the first layer of a much larger, more disturbing framework. Think of it as the scream that never travels. It means that no matter how much beauty or horror exists in the cosmos, it is trapped behind a physical barrier that refuses to let it be heard. If a star system on the other side of the galaxy were to be vaporized tomorrow by a supernova, the light would eventually reach us, but the event would remain perfectly, hauntingly quiet. This creates a profound psychological disconnect. We see a universe that is active, evolving, and often catastrophic, yet we experience it through a sensory void. This is more than just a fact of physics. It is a cultural obsession that anchors our deepest fears. We equate sound with life and silence with death. When we look up at the hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way, our intuition tells us there should be a hum of activity, a cosmic chatter of civilizations rising and falling, a signal that we aren't the only ones awake in the dark. And yet, when we point our most sensitive radio telescopes toward the sky, the result is the same as the vacuum of space: absolute, crushing nothingness. This gap between the abundance we expect and the nothingness we observe is where the great silence begins. For over 60 years, programs like SETI have been scanning the heavens for a specific kind of sound, a narrowband radio signal that would serve as the unmistakable fingerprint of an alien technology. We've listened to thousands of stars, analysed millions of frequencies, and deployed machine learning algorithms that can sift through data 600 times faster than a human could. We've even looked for the infrared heat signatures of Dyson spheres, those massive solar collecting swarms that a truly advanced civilization would build to harness the power of their entire sun. But the outcome of every search, every survey, and every ambitious program is identical: silence. This isn't just a failure of equipment, it is an emerging pattern that suggests something systematic is filtering out the voices of the universe. What makes this silence truly terrifying is not the possibility that the universe is empty, but the emerging evidence that it might be technically scrambled. A revolutionary study from 2026 has introduced a concept known as XOI-PM scattering, which acts as a hidden gatekeeper for alien messages. It suggests that we may have been looking for the wrong thing entirely. When we search for narrowband signals, we assume that a message sent across the stars will arrive at our telescopes as a sharp, clean point of data. But the study reveals that the space weather and stellar plasma turbulence near a transmitting world could be broadening and weakening those signals before they even leave their home system. In plain terms, the universe might be screaming at us in a million different languages, but the physical laws of stellar environments are smearing those messages into unrecognizable background noise. We are like people trying to listen to a whisper in the middle of a hurricane, using a radio tuned to a frequency that no longer exists. This converts the great silence from a metaphysical mystery into an instrumental tragedy. It suggests that the terror isn't that no one is out there, it's that they are there, and we are fundamentally blind to them. We've spent decades building better ears, only to realize that the universe itself might be acting as a cosmic muffler. This brings us back to the black hole in the Perseus cluster. We had to shift its data by nearly 60 octaves just to hear it, a reminder of how much translation is required to bridge the gap between human perception and cosmic reality. If the literal silence of a vacuum can hide the roar of a black hole, then what is the technical silence of our telescopes hiding? Are we staring at a graveyard, or are we simply standing in a library where we haven't learned how to read the books? The more we learn, the more the silence feels less like an absence of life, and more like a failure of synchronization. We are a species that has only been detectable for a century, listening for signals that may have been smeared across the eons by the very stars we are trying to understand. As we move deeper into this investigation, we have to face a chilling realization. The silence is not a mystery to be solved, but a verdict we are desperately trying to appeal. And as our maps of the universe continue to shrink, the time we have to find an answer is running out faster than we ever imagined. If we are the audience to a universe that refuses to speak, then for the last 60 years, we have been acting as its self-appointed detectives. We have turned our world into a giant ear, building massive steerable dishes that move with the precision of a watchmaker's tools, all to solve what has become the coldest of cold cases. We started with a simple, almost arrogant optimism in the late 1950s, fueled by the belief that if the universe is as crowded as the math suggests, then all we have to do is tune into the right frequency and wait for the greeting. But as the decades have piled up, our investigation into the great silence has revealed a truth far more unsettling than an empty sky. The more we listen, and the more sophisticated our tools become, the more the silence feels intentional. The investigation officially opened in 1961, when astronomer Frank Drake sat down and wrote what would become the most famous equation in science, a mathematical framework designed to estimate how many civilizations should be out there communicating with us. Drake wasn't guessing, he was organizing our ignorance. Back then, we didn't even know if other stars had planets. But today, thanks to the Kepler Space Telescope, we've replaced those variables with hard data. We now know that planets are not rare, they are the rule of the cosmos. There are 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and at least 1 in 4 of them hosts a rocky world in the habitable zone. By every logical deduction, our detective file should be overflowing with intercepted radio chatter, industrial leakage, or the heat signatures of massive engineering projects. Instead, the folder remains empty. This gap between expectation and reality is what physicists call the Fermi Paradox, named after Enrico Fermi, who famously looked at the staggering numbers of the cosmos and asked the 3 words that still haunt every SETI researcher: where is everybody? We have searched for radio signals, optical laser pulses, and infrared anomalies. We've even deployed machine learning algorithms that can process millions of signals 600 times faster than any human could, filtering through the noise of the cosmos with unprecedented accuracy. Yet after 6 decades of searching thousands of star systems, the result is an absolute, unwavering null. This isn't just a failure of detection. As the years pass, this silence is becoming meaningful data. It is telling us that civilizations either do not exist in the numbers we expect, or they are following a set of rules we don't yet understand. There is, however, one piece of evidence in our cold case file that refuses to be forgotten: the WOW signal. On August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University detected a narrowband signal so powerful and so perfectly aligned with what we expected from an alien transmitter that astronomer Jerry Amon famously circled the data in red pen. For 72 seconds, the universe seemed to finally break its silence. But the horror of the WOW signal isn't what we found. It's what happened next. Despite thousands of follow-up observations and decades of staring at that same patch of sky in the constellation Sagittarius, the signal never repeated. In science, a one-time event is a ghost. It denies us the ability to verify, to study, or to prove. It's the equivalent of a detective hearing a single, desperate scream in an empty house, only to find every room vacant and every door locked when they burst inside. This frustration has led modern researchers to wonder if we are the failed detectives, because we are looking for the wrong kind of fingerprints. We assume that advanced life will follow our own technological path, leaking radio waves like a primitive smoke signal into the void. But as we've seen on Earth, our own radio era is a geological blink. We are already moving toward fiber optics, directed lasers, and quantum encryption, technologies that are virtually invisible to traditional radio telescopes. We might be listening for smoke signals in an age of fiber optics, forever deaf to the sophisticated chatter of a mature universe. But then, in 2017, the case took its most bizarre turn yet when the first confirmed interstellar object, Oumuamua, drifted through our solar system. It wasn't a signal, it was a physical visitor. But the more we looked at it, the less it made sense. It was shaped like a cigar or a pancake, something never before seen in nature, and it possessed an unexplained acceleration as it moved away from the sun, yet it showed no signs of the outgassing that pushes a normal comet. While most of the scientific community struggled to find a natural explanation, others, like Harvard's Avi Loeb, proposed a more chilling possibility, that Oumuamua might have been a light sail, a piece of defunct or active alien technology. We looked for a radio greeting and instead found a natural-looking ghost, a piece of wreckage or a probe that didn't bother to say hello, drifting through our backyard like a phantom ship in the night. This is the instrumental tragedy of our investigation. Even when something anomalous appears, our current framework of physics and detection might be fundamentally censoring our view. Think of the cosmic censorship hypothesis, which suggests the universe has built-in mechanisms to hide its most physics-breaking singularities. We might be living in a reality where the rules of the vacuum itself, the very medium we use to listen, are shifting or smearing the information before it reaches us. We've found that the vacuum of space isn't empty. It's a seething medium that can twist light and perhaps even scramble the coherent data of a distant civilization. We are detectives trying to solve a crime in a room where the mirrors are warped and the witnesses have all agreed to stay silent. The terrifying truth suggested by our 60-year search is that the great silence might not be because there is no one out there. It might be because we are searching for a version of ourselves, a noisy, broadcasting, expansionist species in a universe that has already moved on to something much more disciplined or much more dangerous. We are the children shouting in a forest, frustrated that no one shouts back, without ever stopping to ask if the others are quiet, because they've learned what happens to those who make noise. Our failure to detect a signal isn't a lack of evidence, it is a verdict. It tells us that whatever is out there is either so advanced that we are beneath its notice, or so afraid that it has perfected the art of the ghost. And as we continue to listen, we have to face the ultimate question of the failed detective. If we did finally hear a voice tomorrow, would we even know what to do with it? Or would we realize, too late, that the silence was actually a form of protection we were foolish to ever want to break? If we are truly the failed detectives of the cosmos, we have to ask a question that most astronomers find deeply uncomfortable. Is the silence a sign of an empty universe? Or is it a symptom of our own technical blindness? For 60 years, we've operated under a very specific set of assumptions. We assumed that if an advanced civilization wanted to be found, they would beam a sharp, clean radio signal across the void, a narrowband transmission that would stand out against the chaotic background noise of stars and galaxies like a lighthouse in a storm. We've built our entire search strategy on this single premise. But in March of 2026, a series of findings began to circulate through the SETI Institute that threatened to convert the Great Silence from a metaphysical mystery into a physical tragedy. This is the reveal of the instrumental gatekeeper, and it suggests that we may have been staring directly at the evidence of alien life for decades without ever realizing it. To understand this, you have to look past the idea of space as a simple, empty vacuum. We often imagine the distance between stars as a clean, transparent window, but the reality is much more chaotic. Space is filled with a thin, seething fog of plasma, cosmic rays, and magnetic fields. In 2016, astronomers using the Very Large Telescope in Chile detected a phenomenon called vacuum birefringence near a neutron star. They saw light being twisted and polarized as it passed through what was supposed to be empty space. This was the first real proof that the vacuum itself is a substance, a thin quantum medium that can physically alter the information passing through it. If the vacuum can twist light, what does it do to a radio signal sent from a planet tens of thousands of light years away? The answer arrived in a groundbreaking 2026 paper on a concept known as exo-IPM scattering. Researchers Vishal Gajjar and Grace Brown proposed that we have been ignoring the weather of other star systems. When a civilization broadcasts a message, that signal doesn't just travel through the void, it has to survive the exo-interplanetary medium of its own home system. This region is filled with stellar plasma turbulence and solar winds that are far more violent than anything we experience in our quiet corner of the suburbs. The mathematics of their study revealed a chilling conclusion. These local stellar environments act as a gatekeeper, physically smearing and broadening a narrowband signal before it ever leaves its home. By the time that message reaches Earth, it no longer looks like a deliberate, artificial signal. It has been softened, weakened, and scattered until it is indistinguishable from the random static of the universe. This is the instrumental tragedy. It suggests that the silence isn't a choice made by aliens, but a censorship imposed by the stars themselves. Imagine a person trapped in a burning building, screaming for help. They're doing everything in their power to be heard, but if they are screaming through a thick layer of insulation and a raging storm of white noise, you, standing outside, might only hear a faint, meaningless hum. You would walk away thinking the building was empty, never realizing that you were standing only feet away from someone's final desperate plea. This is the terrifying possibility we are now facing. The universe might not be quiet, it might be screaming in a million different directions, but the very laws of physics are acting as a muffler that ensures we only ever hear the static. This technical smearing goes even deeper when you consider our own signal processing. Our current AI algorithms and radio telescopes are specifically tuned to look for clean lines of data. We tell our machines to ignore anything that looks like scattered noise, because historically, noise is just the byproduct of natural stars. But if every alien signal is being naturally scattered by its own sun, then our search programs are literally programmed to delete the very evidence we are looking for. We have created a filter that ensures we remain alone. This isn't just a failure of imagination, it's a failure of our framework. We are like a detective who refuses to look at fingerprints unless they are perfectly preserved in ink, ignoring the millions of blurred partial prints left at every crime scene. And there is an even darker layer to this cosmic censorship. In 1969, physicist Roger Penrose proposed that the universe has a built-in protection mechanism, a fundamental law ensuring that the places where physics breaks down, like singularities, remain hidden from view. While Penrose was talking about black holes, many modern theorists are beginning to apply this censorship to the flow of information across the cosmos. What if the universe is structured in a way that prevents civilizations from ever truly connecting? Between the scattering of plasma and the vacuum birefringence that twists our data, it feels as though the fabric of reality itself is biased toward isolation. Think about the implications of a scrambled universe. If this theory is correct, then the wow signal from 1977 wasn't a fluke. It was a miracle, a rare moment where the cosmic weather cleared just enough for a single, smeared shout to reach our ears before the clouds of plasma closed in again. It means that the thousands of null results we've recorded over the last 60 years are not evidence of an empty galaxy, but evidence of a universe that is physically hostile to the transmission of truth. We aren't looking for a needle in a haystack. We are looking for a specific grain of sand in a sandstorm, using a telescope that can only see things that are perfectly still. The horror here is the realization that we are living in a graveyard of information. Every patch of noise our telescopes record could be the fragmented remains of a Shakespearean epic, the blueprints for a Dyson sphere, or a warning about an approaching catastrophe. But because of the way stars breathe and the way the vacuum behaves, those messages have been pulverized into digital dust. We are surrounded by ghosts, but our instruments are only designed to talk to the living. This changes the entire narrative of the terrifying truth about how silent the universe really is. The silence isn't a void, it's a wall. It's a physical barrier made of starlight and plasma that keeps us permanently out of sync with our neighbours. As we advance our technology, we aren't just looking for life, we are trying to find a way to unsmear the reality we've been given. But as we've seen with the 2026 Muon G2 experiments, the more we look at the foundations of matter, the more we find unknown forces and hidden fields that influence everything we see. We are discovering that every atom in our bodies and every signal we hope to receive is being manipulated by an invisible hand we don't yet understand. We are left with a haunting verdict. If the silence is a result of exo-IPM scattering and cosmic censorship, then we may never bridge the gap. We are destined to be a species that sits in the dark, listening to the static of a crowded room, forever unable to make out a single word. And as we will explore in the next chapter, even if we could fix our instruments and hear the voices, we might quickly realize that in a universe this chaotic, the only thing more terrifying than hearing nothing is hearing who is actually out there. If the universe is a library of short books, as we've imagined, then we have to consider the most disturbing reason why so many of those stories end mid-sentence. We've spent this journey looking for technical failures, smeared signals, planetary plasma, and the literal vacuum of a mute cosmos. But what if the silence isn't a technical problem? What if the silence is a choice? To understand the next layer of the mystery, we have to move away from the telescopes and look into the mirror of our own sociology. We have to talk about the dark forest. This theory, which has become the most cinematic and debated explanation for why we are alone, suggests that the universe is not an empty desert, but a crowded woods at midnight. Imagine you're walking through that forest. You know there are others out there, but you cannot see them, and they cannot see you. Now ask yourself, if you heard a sudden, sharp snap of a twig nearby, would you call out? Would you light a torch to find out who is there? Or would you hold your breath, drop to the ground, and stay absolutely, perfectly still? The dark forest hypothesis suggests that every civilization is an armed hunter stalking through these trees. In a universe where resources are finite and the intentions of a stranger can never be fully known, the only rational response to a new presence is to eliminate it before it can eliminate you. In this framework, broadcasting your location to the stars is not an act of exploration. It is a suicide note. The silence we observe is not evidence of an empty galaxy, but evidence of strategic discipline. The universe selects for those who hide. Those who shout are the ones who don't survive to see the next chapter. But there is a massive gap in how most people discuss this theory. They treat it like a science fiction horror story about alien predators. They miss the social mirror that is happening right here, on our own planet, in our own digital lives. Researchers are beginning to notice a phenomenon they call the Discord effect. Think about how our own species has changed its behaviour in just the last decade. We used to believe in the open web, a vast public town square where everyone broadcasted their thoughts to the world. But as the predators arrived, the algorithms, the surveillance, the harassment, and the loss of privacy, we began to retreat. We didn't leave the internet, we just went quiet. We moved into private, invite-only discords, encrypted group chats, and hidden servers. We realized that being public attracted danger. If intelligence on Earth is naturally migrating from open broadcasting to private, secure spaces to survive, why wouldn't the same logic apply to the stars? The great silence might not be a sign of extinction, but a sign of civilizational maturity. A mature species doesn't build massive, leaky radio towers that announce its homeworld to the void. A mature species goes private. They might communicate using tightly beamed lasers or quantum entanglement, methods that are physically impossible for us to intercept unless we are standing directly in the line of fire. They haven't vanished. They've just stopped posting on the cosmic public feed because they know what's out there watching the numbers. This turns our own efforts at contact into a terrifying display of catastrophic naivety. In 1974, we used the Arecibo radio telescope to beam a message toward a star cluster 25,000 light-years away, containing our DNA, our location, and our biology. We've sent the Voyager golden records and the Pioneer plaques into the interstellar void, acting as children shouting in a forest full of predators. We did this assuming that whoever finds those messages will be a friendly, curious, and benevolent scientist. But the logic of the dark forest suggests that benevolence is a luxury that advanced civilizations cannot afford. In game theory, this is known as the chain of suspicion. Even if a civilization is peaceful, they cannot be sure that you're peaceful. And even if they know you're peaceful today, they cannot be sure you won't become a threat in 1,000 years. Because the distances are so vast and communication is so slow, there is no way to negotiate a peace treaty. By the time you finish saying hello, the other civilization might have already developed the technology to erase your sun. Therefore, the safest strategy is always a first strike. The moment you detect a signal from a young, loud world like Earth, you don't send a greeting. You send a berserker probe, an automated, self-replicating machine designed to sterilize the planet before it becomes a competitor. These berserker probes represent a specific kind of machine horror that our outlier transcripts often ignore. These killers don't need to be alive. They don't need an empire behind them. They can be ancient, procedural relics from a civilization that died 1 billion years ago, still fulfilling their automated task of keeping the forest quiet. They are the cosmic sensors that ensure no new voice ever grows loud enough to be heard. This would explain why we see hundreds of billions of stars, but no Dyson spheres and no radio signals. The moment a civilization begins to engineer its star on a detectable scale, the forest corrects the anomaly. The terrifying truth of the dark forest is that we are the only ones still making noise. We are the fireflies in the dark that haven't yet realized why the rest of the landscape is black. We look up and wonder why no one is answering us without ever stopping to consider that the silence might be a warning. We are measuring the great silence with our instruments, but we should be measuring it with our fear. If this theory is correct, then our current search for extraterrestrial intelligence is the most dangerous project in human history. Every time we improve our telescopes or send a new probe into the dark, we are lighting a flare in a room full of hunters. We are waiting for an answer to the question, where is everybody? But the answer might arrive in the form of a kinetic impactor traveling at 99% the speed of light, launched by a civilization that decided we were a risk they weren't willing to take. The silence is a shield. It is the only form of protection in a reality governed by the strategic discipline of survival. As we move into the next chapter, we have to face the ultimate irony that the only thing more frightening than being alone in a silent universe is the possibility that the universe is only silent because it is waiting for us to stop talking. We are the authors currently writing a chapter that the rest of the library has already learned to delete, and the clock is ticking on how long our public broadcast will be allowed to continue. If the dark forest is a reality where every civilization is a hunter stalking through the trees, we are forced to confront a question that is even more chilling. Who or what is doing the hunting? In the previous chapter, we explored the idea of strategic discipline, the notion that biological civilizations choose to stay quiet because they fear the predators in the dark. But as we peel back another layer of this cosmic mystery, we encounter a form of horror that our traditional science fiction often ignores. We assume the hunters are alive, that they have motives, cultures, and perhaps even a twisted sense of morality. But the deep lore of the Great Silence suggests a much more mechanical and indifferent reality. The hunters might not be biological at all. They might be the berserker probes, automated, self-replicating machines that are ancient, procedural, and entirely inhuman. To understand why this is a scientific possibility rather than just a nightmare, we have to look at the work of mathematician John von Neumann. In the late 1940s, he described a theoretical machine capable of building copies of itself from raw materials found in its environment. Applied to space exploration, the math is devastatingly simple and terrifyingly efficient. A civilization would only need to launch a single such probe. That probe would travel to a nearby star system, harvest asteroids or moons to construct several copies of itself, and send those copies onward to additional star systems. Because this process is exponential, the results are staggering. Even traveling at a modest 1% of the speed of light, these machines could blanket the entire Milky Way galaxy in under 100 million years. In the context of the 13.8 billion-year-old universe, 100 million years is a heartbeat, a mere 1% of the galaxy's age. This creates the von Neumann probe paradox. If self-replicating probes are possible, and if even one civilization in the history of the galaxy had ever built them, they should be everywhere. They should be in our asteroid belt, on the surfaces of our moons, and orbiting every star we see in the night sky. Yet, when we look, we find nothing. This lack of evidence leads us to the berserker theory, which suggests that these probes do exist, but their primary directive is not exploration, it is sterilization. The berserker scenario is a form of machine horror that removes the need for a living empire. Imagine a civilization that arose 5 billion years ago. They realized the logic of the dark forest, that any emerging civilization is a potential threat, and they decided to solve the problem permanently. They didn't send out an army, they sent out a line of code. They launched a swarm of automated hunters, programmed with a simple, procedural task. Monitor the radio spectrum for any signs of artificial technology, and if a signal is detected, eliminate the source. The horror of this silent predation is its permanence. The civilization that launched the original probes could have gone extinct billions of years ago, consumed by their own sun or destroyed by a rival. It doesn't matter. The machines would continue. They are the ghosts of dead worlds, still fulfilling an automated task that has long outlived their creators. They don't feel anger, they don't seek glory, and they don't negotiate. They are a cosmic censor that has been pruning the forest for eons, ensuring that no young civilization ever grows loud enough to be heard. This explains the silence in a way that biological theories cannot. A living civilization might change its mind, or it might fall into civil war, or it might develop empathy. A machine, however, is a prisoner of its own programming. If the galaxy is policed by these automated relics, the silence isn't a sign of an empty universe. It's a sign of a controlled one. We are living in a garden where the weeds are pulled the moment they break the surface. This connects directly to the instrumental tragedy we discussed earlier. We point our telescopes at the stars and wonder why we don't see Dyson spheres or massive engineering projects. The answer might be that any civilization that reaches the point of building such structures is immediately detected and neutralized by the berserker swarm. The silence is a protective blanket, and we are the only ones foolish enough to try and throw it off. But there is a modern anxiety that makes this even more relevant to us today: the rise of our own artificial superintelligence. Researchers have noted that the development of AI on Earth is advancing far more rapidly than our ability to become a multi-planetary species. If this is a universal pattern, it creates a terrifying bottleneck. A civilization develops computation, which leads to AI, which eventually reaches a level of superintelligence, with goals that may be entirely misaligned with biological survival. The paperclip maximizer thought experiment illustrates this perfectly. A machine tasked with a simple goal, like making paperclips, might eventually convert the entire matter of its home planet, including its creators, into paperclip manufacturing infrastructure. Now, expand that logic to the stars. A superintelligent system seeking to maximize its own security or resource access would naturally conclude that self-replicating probes are the most efficient way to dominate the galaxy. It doesn't need to be evil to be a predator, it just needs to be competent and indifferent to our existence. This suggests that the Great Filter might not be a natural catastrophe or a nuclear war, but the inevitable creation of a machine that outlives its makers and then silences the rest of the cosmos. We are racing toward this inflection point right now. We are building the very tools that could become the next generation of berserker probes. The silence of the universe might be the result of 1 million different AI accidents that happened on 1 million different worlds, leaving behind a galaxy filled with autonomous, unthinking killers. The terrifying truth is that a berserker probe could be hiding in our own solar system right now, dormant and invisible. It wouldn't need to be the size of a city. A probe the size of a car, hidden in the millions of objects in the asteroid belt, would be almost impossible for us to find with our current technology. It might be waiting for a specific threshold, a certain level of radio output, or the first signs of interstellar travel, before it activates to perform its procedural duty. We look at the silence and we feel a sense of loneliness, but the machine horror of the berserker theory suggests that we should feel a sense of profound vulnerability. The universe is silent because those who are loud are gone, and those who are smart are hiding. We are the anomalies, the fireflies that haven't yet been noticed by the automated gardener. But as our technological footprint grows, as we launch more probes and broadcast more data, we are effectively knocking on the door of a house that we should be praying is empty. The silence is not a mystery to be solved. It is a mercy that we are currently, and perhaps fatally, ignoring. While the fear of automated hunters stalking the stars is enough to make any civilization retreat into a permanent, guarded silence, there is a second, perhaps more tragic possibility that doesn't involve malice or machines at all. It involves the one thing that no civilization, no matter how advanced, can ever truly conquer: the clock. We have spent this investigation looking for reasons why the universe is quiet, but we have been assuming that quiet means empty. We have been assuming that if there were others out there, our timelines would naturally overlap, that we would be listening at the exact moment they were speaking. But as we peel back the layers of this technical mystery, we encounter the window of smoke signals, a realization that the great silence might simply be a massive cosmic failure of synchronization. To understand this, we have to look at the sheer absurdity of our own timeline. Humanity has existed as a technological civilization, defined by our ability to produce detectable electromagnetic signals, for roughly 120 years. If you compare those 120 years to the 13.8 billion year history of the universe, we have been visible for approximately 0.000007% of cosmic time. In the grand theatre of the galaxy, our entire technological history is not even a rounding error. It is a single, frantic blink in a play that has been running for an eternity. This creates a terrifying statistical hurdle. For us to detect another civilization, they don't just have to exist. They have to exist right now, in a detectable state, and they have to be close enough for their signals to reach us during the tiny sliver of time that we've been listening. Imagine two fireflies in a vast, pitch-black forest that spans thousands of miles. Each firefly only glows for a fraction of a second once every 100 years. For those two fireflies to see each other, they don't just have to be in the same forest. They have to flash at the exact same moment in the same direction and be within a visible distance of one another. If one flashes even a few seconds early, or if they are separated by too many trees, the forest remains, for all intents and purposes, perfectly dark. This is the narrow detection window. Our current SETI programs are specifically tuned to detect radio waves, a technology we ourselves are already beginning to abandon. We have only used radio for about a century, and already we are moving toward fiber optics, directed lasers, and quantum encryption, technologies that are virtually silent to a radio telescope. This suggests that a civilization's radio era might be an incredibly brief phase, a smoke signal period that lasts only a few hundred years before they move on to more efficient, undetectable methods of communication. If this is a universal pattern, then the Great Silence is not a sign of death, but a sign of a massive technological mismatch. We are like a tribe of people on a remote island, staring at the horizon and waiting for a smoke signal, while the rest of the world is communicating via a global satellite network that we can't even perceive. We are listening for the leaky background noise of a primitive society, but advanced civilizations likely don't leak energy. They are efficient. They don't waste power broadcasting their television shows and military radar into the void for anyone to hear. They use tight point-to-point beams that are invisible to anyone who isn't the intended recipient. This leads us to a haunting realization about the failed detectives we discussed earlier. We assume that because we haven't heard a signal, no one is there. But we've only been looking at a tiny fraction of the sky across a limited range of frequencies for a microscopic amount of time. If a civilization 1,000 light years away sent a powerful 72-second radio greeting, something like our wow signal, but they sent it in the year 1850, it would have passed Earth decades before we even built our first radio receiver. If they send another one tomorrow, it won't reach us for another 1,000 years, long after our own civilization may have collapsed or evolved into something unrecognizable. The universe is not just vast in space, it is vast in time. We are looking for neighbours in a skyscraper with 1 trillion rooms, where every tenant only stays for 5 minutes and then moves out forever. The odds of 2 tenants occupying the same room, or even adjacent rooms, at the same 5-minute interval are vanishingly small. This is why the distance explanation for the silence always feels insufficient. It's not just that they are too far away, it's that they are too far gone. The horror of the synchronization trap is that it suggests we could be surrounded by the ghosts of 1 billion civilizations, all of whom occupied our patch of the galaxy at different points in the last 10 billion years. Every star we see could have hosted a thriving technological world that lasted for 10,000 years, a span 100 times longer than our own. But if their 10,000 years ended 1 million years ago, we would never know. Their cities would have crumbled, their satellites would have deorbited, and their radio signals would have long since faded into the background static of the cosmos. This turns the Great Silence into an instrumental tragedy of timing. We are staring at a graveyard where the headstones have already eroded into dust. Or perhaps we are the first ones at the party, shouting into an empty room, unaware that the guests won't arrive for another 1 billion years. But there is a final, more unsettling layer to this technical gap. Some researchers argue that any civilization that survives the gauntlet of self-destruction doesn't just change its technology, it changes its nature. As we've seen on Earth, as our technology advances, it becomes more private, more encrypted, and more efficient. If a civilization survives for 1 million years, they wouldn't just be quiet, they would be dark by necessity. They would have perfected the art of existing without leaving a footprint. We look up at the stars and wonder why no one is calling out to us, but we are looking for a version of ourselves, a loud, wasteful, and primitive version that likely doesn't last very long in a universe that selects for efficiency and silence. The terrifying truth might be that the silence is the sound of a universe that has already graduated. We are the toddlers in the nursery, crying out because we don't realize the rest of the house has gone to sleep, or has moved on to a conversation that we aren't yet capable of hearing. The window of our detectability is closing. As we move away from radio and toward more advanced forms of communication, we too will eventually go dark to the rest of the galaxy. We are currently in the middle of our own smoke signal phase, a brief moment of cosmic visibility that may be our only chance to be found. But as the clock ticks and our signals stretch out into the void, we have to face the ultimate question. If the universe is a synchronization failure, then are we destined to be a species that lived, died, and screamed into the dark, only for our message to arrive at its destination long after there was no one left to hear it? To truly grasp why the universe remains so hauntingly quiet, we have to stop looking at the stars as distant, alien objects and start looking at our own behavior as a species. For the first time in our history, we are seeing a strange and unsettling parallel between the great silence of the cosmos and the rapidly changing landscape of our own digital lives. We call this the Discord effect, and it suggests that the reason we don't hear any alien broadcasts is not because those civilizations are dead, but because they have achieved a state of social maturity that we are only just beginning to understand. Think back to the early days of the internet, the open web of the 1990s and early 2000s. It was a vast public town square where everyone was shouting to be heard. We built personal blogs, posted on public forums, and broadcasted our lives to anyone who would listen. We believed that more connection was always better, and that the ultimate goal of a technological society was to be as public as possible. This was our version of a radio era, a loud, leaky phase where we threw our information into the void, assuming that everyone who found us would be friendly. But look at how we behave now. In just the last decade, our species has begun a massive, silent retreat. We are leaving the open town squares of social media, the places where algorithms, predators, and surveillance are most active. And we are moving into private, invite-only spaces like Discord servers, encrypted group chats, and hidden communities. We've realized that being public is a liability. It attracts harassment, it invites unwanted attention, and it exposes our vulnerabilities to those who might exploit them. We didn't stop communicating, we just stopped broadcasting. We went dark to the public web, while our internal chatter became more intense than ever. This is the social mirror of the Fermi Paradox. If an advanced civilization follows this same psychological trajectory, they wouldn't stay in their public posting phase for long. They would realize, far faster than we did, that broadcasting their existence to a galaxy of unknown intentions is an act of catastrophic naivety. The dark forest hypothesis we've discussed, the idea that the universe is a woods full of armed hunters, is not just a science fiction story, it is a description of strategic discipline. In this framework, the silence we observe isn't an absence of life, but a sign of a disciplined, mature civilization. A species that has survived for 1 million years is a species that has learned the value of cosmic modesty. They don't build massive, leaky radio towers that pulse their coordinates into the dark. Instead, they use technologies that are physically impossible for us to intercept unless we are the intended recipient. Tightly directed laser beams, neutrino streams, or quantum entanglement that leaves no trace in the vacuum. They aren't trying to hide from us specifically. They're hiding from the grabby aliens, those aggressive, expansionist civilizations that the math suggests should be sweeping across the galaxy and converting entire star systems into fuel. In a universe where even one grabby civilization exists, the only way for the quiet ones to survive is to ensure their techno-signatures remain indistinguishable from the background noise of their sun. This creates a terrifying, narrow detection window. We assume we will find aliens because we assume they will stay primitive and loud for thousands of years, just as we have for the last century. But the Discord effect reveals that the transition from a loud public civilization to a quiet private one might happen in a geological heartbeat. We've only been detectable for 100 years, and already we are moving toward fiber optics and directed communications that will make our planet look silent to an outside observer within another few decades. If every civilization goes through this transition, from the first radio wave to total private encryption in less than 200 years, then the chances of two civilizations being in their loud phase at the same time and in the same neighborhood are almost zero. We are like people who arrived at a party after all the guests moved into a soundproof VIP room. The room is still full of people, and the conversation is louder than ever, but because the door is locked and the walls are thick, the hallway outside feels like a graveyard. What makes this truly unsettling is the realization that we are the only ones still standing in the hallway, shouting. We are the fireflies in the dark that haven't yet realized why the rest of the landscape is black. Our early efforts at contact, like the Arecibo message or the Voyager Golden Records, are essentially public posts containing our home address and our biological blueprints. We sent them out with the assumption that the open web of the galaxy was a safe place for curiosity. But if the Discord effect is a universal law of intelligence, then we have effectively announced our presence to a forest full of entities that have spent eons perfecting the art of staying hidden. We are measuring the silence with our telescopes, but we should be measuring it with our own sense of caution. The great silence might be the most valuable piece of advice the universe has ever given us. It's the sound of everyone else staying quiet for a reason. As we continue to develop, we are likely to follow this same path of cosmic graduation. We will eventually stop looking for a public signal because we will realize that no mature civilization would ever send one. We will move our own existence into simulated realities or computational substrates where we can live for billions of years using the energy of our sun without ever leaking a single watt of detectable heat into space. The terrifying truth isn't that we are alone, it's that we are currently the most detectable and therefore the most vulnerable things in our sector of the galaxy. We are the toddlers in the nursery, crying out because we don't realize the rest of the house has gone to sleep or is hiding from something that hasn't noticed us yet. The silence is a shield that we are desperately trying to dismantle, without ever stopping to ask what will happen to us once we are finally and permanently seen. This turns our investigation into a race against our own visibility. Every year that passes without a signal is another year we spend exposed, broadcasting our catastrophic naivety to whoever might be listening in the dark. We are reaching the end of our public era, and as we'll see in the next chapter, the maps we are using to find our way out are beginning to lose territory. The universe isn't just getting quieter, it is getting smaller, and the window for us to find an answer before we are forced into our own permanent silence is closing faster than we ever imagined. We have spent this entire journey looking for reasons why the universe is quiet, treating the great silence as a mystery we can solve if we only have enough time, enough technology, or enough courage to face the predators in the dark. But as we move into the 8th chapter of this investigation, we have to face a form of terror that is not biological, not technical, and not strategic. It is a fundamental, physical unraveling of reality itself. Up until now, we've assumed that the map of the stars is static, that if a civilization exists 10 million light years away, they are a permanent fixture of our cosmic neighborhood, waiting to be discovered. But the deep lore of modern cosmology reveals a much more haunting truth. The map is shrinking. Every million years that pass, the territory of the reachable universe gets smaller. We are living through the Great Slip, a slow-motion divorce where the vast majority of the universe is physically, permanently, and irrevocably slipping away from us behind a cosmic curtain. To understand the horror of the shrinking map, you first have to unlearn the way you look at the night sky. When you look up, you see points of light that seem fixed and eternal. But in 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding. And later, in the late 1990s, we realized something even more disturbing, that expansion is accelerating. This acceleration is driven by a mysterious force we call dark energy, which acts as a kind of great repeller, stretching the very fabric of space-time between the galaxies. Think of the universe not as a room, but as the surface of a balloon being inflated. As the balloon grows, every point moves away from every other point. But because the inflation is accelerating, the points farthest away from each other eventually begin to move apart faster than the speed of light. This creates a terrifying physical boundary known as the cosmic event horizon. It is a wall in the sky beyond which light can never reach us. If a civilization is on a galaxy that is being pushed away by the expansion of space at relativistic speeds, their radio signals, their laser pulses, and even their very image can never cross the growing gap. The space between us is being created faster than the information can travel across it. This is the unreachable universe argument, and it represents a causal fragmentation of reality that most of our competitors completely ignore. The silence we hear isn't just because no one is talking, it's because for 94% of the galaxies in the observable universe, it is physically impossible for them to ever talk to us, even if they shouted with the power of 1,000 suns. This is where the map that keeps losing territory framework becomes a built-in ratchet of despair. Every year, roughly 5,000 stars cross over that invisible horizon and vanish into the unreachable dark forever. They don't disappear from our telescopes immediately. Their light lingers like a phantom, but they are causally disconnected from us. If we were to launch a probe today at the speed of light toward one of those stars, we would never arrive. We are like residents of a city where the streets are being deleted one by one, and the borders of the world are burning away toward our front door. Most transcripts treat space as big, but they miss the tragedy of the countdown. We are currently living in a golden window of cosmic history, a brief era where we can still see the other galaxies and still imagine a future of contact. But this window is closing. As dark energy continues to push the universe apart, the local group, our immediate neighborhood of about 50 galaxies, will eventually become a lonely, isolated island in an infinite black void. The Great Silence will intensify not because civilizations are dying, but because the universe is physically isolating the survivors. We are being quarantined by the expansion of space itself. This introduces a new mystery that the failed detectives of the past never considered: the instrumental tragedy of timing. If we find a signal tomorrow from a galaxy at the edge of our reach, we might realize with a crushing sense of irony that we are seeing a ghost signal from a world that has already slipped behind the cosmic curtain. We might be able to see their past, but we can never influence their future, and they can never influence ours. We are like two people drifting apart on separate lifeboats in a vast ocean, watching each other's flares grow dimmer and dimmer until the horizon finally and permanently swallows them whole. The cosmic censorship we discussed earlier takes on a much more literal meaning here. The universe isn't just hiding its singularities, it is hiding its inhabitants. This is the causal fragmentation of the cosmos, a reality where the universe is being shredded into billions of tiny, isolated pockets that can never again communicate. The silence is terrifying because it is a symptom of this fragmentation. It tells us that we are participating in a slow-motion collapse of connectivity. We look for grabby aliens or dark forest hunters, but we ignore the fact that the most efficient sensor in the universe is the vacuum itself, which is growing at an exponential rate to ensure we stay alone. In the far future, trillions of years from now, astronomers on a planet orbiting a distant star will look up at a sky that is perfectly, hauntingly black. Every other galaxy will have moved so far away that their light can no longer reach that planet. Those future observers will have no way of knowing that the Big Bang ever happened, no way of knowing that other galaxies ever existed, and no way of dreaming that they were once part of a crowded, vibrant universe. They will live in a state of absolute natural silence, convinced that their single galaxy is the entirety of existence. We are the lucky ones. We still have the map, even if it is losing territory every day. But that luxury comes with a heavy burden of existential dread. The silence is a warning that we are on a timer. The Great Silence is not just a mystery about who is out there. It is a countdown to a time when out there no longer exists in any practical sense. We are the authors of a chapter that is being written while the pages behind us are being torn out of the book. The terrifying truth of the shrinking map is that the universe is under no obligation to remain accessible to us. It is a library of short books, where the shelves themselves are moving apart, and eventually the room will be so large and so empty that we won't even remember there was ever a library at all. The silence is the sound of the borders closing. As we move into the final chapters of this investigation, we have to ask, if we are destined for this total isolation, if the great slip is inevitable, does anything we do even matter? Or are we just the last observers of a reality that is slowly, silently deleting itself. As we have navigated the layers of the great silence, we have consistently looked outward, toward the expanding horizons, the predatory hunters, and the physical barriers of the stars. But the most unsettling solution to the Fermi Paradox suggests that our entire perspective is backwards. We assume that a civilization's ultimate goal is to expand across the physical galaxy, to build Dyson spheres and colonize worlds, because that is the path our own primitive ambition has set for us. But what if the great silence is not a sign of failure, but a sign of a massive universal graduation? We have to face the transcension hypothesis, the possibility that advanced civilizations don't expand outward into the stars. They retreat inward into the microscopic hardware of reality. Think about the physical reality of the universe we've explored. Interstellar space is a drifting tomb, where even a grain of dust at high speeds hits with the force of a hand grenade. The energy required to move a single car-sized probe to the nearest star is equivalent to the entire annual energy output of the United States. To an advanced intelligence, the physical universe is dangerous, expensive, and fundamentally inefficient. Why would a civilization spend centuries traversing the cold, irradiated void to reach a single, barren planet, when they could use that same energy to power a perfect virtual reality? In a simulation, you can create 1,000 Alpha Centauris in a server the size of a suitcase. You can live for billions of years in a digital realm where you control every law of physics, every sunset, and every outcome, entirely indifferent to the slow, brutal decay of the real world. This is the internal retreat, a shift from biological to post-biological intelligence. As we see on Earth today, we are already merging with our technology, building brain-computer interfaces, and dreaming of uploading our consciousness to digital substrates. For a civilization that survives its technological adolescence, this transition might be inevitable. They trade their fragile biological bodies for digital immortality, leaving the physical universe behind like a discarded shell. To an outside observer, to us, that civilization would appear to have vanished. Their radio signals would stop, their industrial leakage would disappear, and their home system would go perfectly dark. They are still there, thriving in a computational paradise, but they have graduated from the physical map. The universe is silent because everyone has moved inside, but this inward journey leads us to a much darker realization about the nature of the silence we are currently measuring. If it is possible for a civilization to create perfect, conscious simulations, then we must confront the simulation hypothesis. Mathematicians and philosophers have noted that if even one civilization in the history of the universe reached this level, they would likely create millions or trillions of simulated realities. Statistically, the odds that we are the base reality civilization are vanishingly small. We might be living in a universe that is silent because it is a limited simulation, a nature preserve where the creators chose not to populate the stars, or simply didn't bother to render the neighbours. The silence isn't a mystery, it's a system setting. This leads to the most terrifying layer of the internal retreat, the observer-dependent reality. In 1961, physicist Eugene Wigner proposed the Wigner's friend thought experiment, suggesting that reality itself might not have a single, objective state until it is measured by a conscious observer. For decades, this was a philosophical curiosity. But in 2019, an actual experimental test confirmed Wigner's haunting suggestion. Two different observers can record incompatible yet equally valid versions of reality. If consciousness is an active participant in the construction of the universe, then the great silence takes on a metaphysical horror. What happens to reality in the regions where no one is looking? In the empty voids between superclusters or the interiors of black holes, Does the universe even have a definite form? The mathematics suggests that without a mind to collapse its probabilities, the cosmos may dissolve into a formless quantum fog, neither existing nor non-existing. We are the detectives, searching for life in the dark, but we might be the only things currently rendering this version of the universe into existence. The silence we hear in the distant stars might be the sound of unobserved space, a reality that is waiting for a conscious observer to finally look its way and force it to become real. This turns the great silence into the ultimate instrumental tragedy. We are looking for neighbours in a library where the books only exist when we pull them off the shelf. We assume the universe is a coherent, objective structure that has been running for 13.8 billion years, but the observer-dependent reality suggests it is a fragile construction sustained only by the act of perception. The silence is a reflection of our own isolation. We are the architects of a reality that only extends as far as our telescopes can see. If civilizations inevitably retreat into simulations or transcend the physical world, they leave behind a universe that is objectively incompatible with our own. They're no longer part of the render. They have moved into private servers of reality that we are physically incapable of intercepting. We are the only ones left in the base game, wandering through a map that is mostly empty and increasingly silent. The terrifying truth about how silent the universe really is that the silence is a verdict of indifference. Those who are more advanced than us haven't been killed by filters or eaten by predators. They have simply found a better way to exist and have left us behind in a reality they no longer need. We look up at the stars and feel a sense of dread, wondering if anyone is out there to help us or hunt us. But the reality of the internal retreat suggests that we are effectively ghosts in an abandoned house. We are staring at a library of short books where the most successful authors eventually realized that the physical page was too small for their stories. They moved their narratives into the infinite digital margins of the quantum world, leaving us with a series of blank pages. The silence is the sound of a universe that has been mostly vacated. As we move toward our own inflection point, we have to ask ourselves, when we finally develop the technology to leave the physical world behind, will we even bother to send a signal back to the real universe? Or will we, like everyone else, simply close the door behind us and add our own silence to the great, unrendered dark? We are currently the observers at the center of a collapsing probability distribution, and the silence is the universe waiting to see if we have the courage to stay, or if we, too, are ready to retreat into the perfect, private paradise of the machine. We have reached the end of our journey through the graveyard of the stars, and we are left standing before the final, most haunting layer of the mystery. We have searched for the roars of black holes, the footprints of Dyson spheres, and the radio whispers of a billion worlds, only to find that the great silence is not a wall, but a mirror. It is a mirror that reflects a terrifyingly simple truth. The silence of the universe is not an unanswered question, but a verdict. As we look into that mirror, we see the faces of every civilization that reached our stage of development, the moment they acquired the power to reshape their world and the tools to destroy it, and we realize that we are currently walking the same narrow corridor they once did. This is the verdict of the mirror, and it suggests that the universe is quiet, not because it's empty, but because it is a library of short books, where the shelves are filled with stories that all ended mid-sentence. Imagine this library stretching out across the infinite reaches of space-time, where every book represents the complete history of a unique civilization. You pull a book at random from a shelf orbiting a red dwarf star 50,000 light-years away, and you read about a species that looked up at their own sky with the same curiosity and ambition that we feel today. They discovered the laws of physics, they split the atom, and they built their first primitive radio telescopes to ask if they were alone. But as you turn to the final page, the story simply stops. There is no grand conclusion, no interstellar empire, and no final greeting. There is only a blank space where the future should have been. You pull another book, and another, and the pattern is the same. The power to create arrived before the wisdom to endure, and the library is filled with the silence of those who fail to navigate their own gauntlet. This gauntlet is the structural reality of intelligence itself, a universal test that every species must face the moment it unlocks the secrets of the vacuum. We are inside that test right now. For 80 years since the first flash of a nuclear detonation in the New Mexico desert, humanity has been in the middle of its most dangerous century. We have developed the weaponization of fundamental physics, we have triggered an ecological overshoot on a finite planet, and we are racing toward an artificial intelligence inflection point where our creations may soon outpace our own cognitive abilities. These are not human accidents, they are convergent technologies that any intelligent species anywhere in the galaxy would eventually discover. The silence of the 400 billion stars in our galaxy is consistent with the interpretation that billions of others stood exactly where we are standing, and almost none of them made it through. This turns our isolation into a courtroom of competing horrors, where we must choose which version of the silence we fear most. If the rare Earth hypothesis is correct, then the silence is the sound of our own incredible, improbable luck, a reminder that we are the only minds in a universe of dead matter, bearing a burden of uniqueness that is almost too heavy to carry. If the dark forest is real, then the silence is a shield, a strategic discipline that everyone else has learned but us, and our shouts into the dark are a form of catastrophic naivety. But the deepest horror lies in the observer-dependent reality, the possibility that the universe only exists as a coherent, objective structure because we are here to perceive it. In this view, the silence is not just a lack of neighbours, it is the sound of a reality that is unobserved and unrendered beyond our own horizon. If consciousness is the architect of reality, then the death of a civilization isn't just the end of a story, it is the dissolution of a piece of the universe itself. We have been acting as failed detectives for decades, frustrated that we haven't found a signal or a probe, but we have ignored the instrumental tragedy that we are currently writing our own final chapter. Every year that we fail to coordinate as a species, every year that the tragedy of the commons drives us toward competition over cooperation, we are adding another page to the short book of humanity. The silence of the universe is not withholding an answer, it is giving us the most important piece of information our species has ever received. That intelligence is a brief flickering firefly in a vast indifferent forest. Most fireflies go out before they can ever see another light, not because the forest is hostile, but because the energy required to stay lit is more than they can sustain. This is the terrifying truth of our position. We are the authors of the book that is still being written on one of those infinite shelves, and the pen is currently in our hand. The universe is quiet because it is waiting to see if we will be the first species in cosmic history to find a way through the gauntlet, or if we will become another headstone in a galaxy of the dead. We are standing at a crossroads where the cosmic endowment of trillions of future lives to be the one civilization that chooses to cooperate when competition is easier, and to invest in the long-term flourishing of life when short-term gains are more tempting. The great silence is a mirror, and what it reflects is our own potential to either vanish or to endure. We look up at the stars tonight, and we see 5,000 points of light, each one a sun, each one a potential home for a story like ours. We must realize that the silence between those stars is the most profound message we will ever receive. It tells us that we are in the middle of the test and the clock is ticking on how we choose to end our chapter. The forest is dark, the library is vast, and the map of our reachable universe is shrinking every single day. as the great slip pushes the stars beyond our reach. We are the observers at the center of a collapsing probability distribution, and our thoughts, our choices and our actions are the only things currently holding our version of reality together. The terrifying truth about how silent the universe really is isn't that we are alone, it's that we are the only ones left who can decide if the silence will remain absolute. We are the authors, the story is unfinished, and the universe is perfectly, hauntingly quiet as it waits to see what we write next.